What's good, family? Give a few minutes for people to come into the building because STORMYBMAN is live and on the move. Shout out to Junior the Truth. Yeah, just thought I would give you guys some content this early Friday morning. I'm en route on my way to the job and thought I had a couple of minutes to just speak my thoughts on a couple of things. You know, we got a big fight coming up on the 13th of September. That'll be when Terrence Bud Crawford challenges undisputed super middleweight champion Saul Canelo Alvarez. And there's a fervor, a heated up debate, argument, expression of opinions on what's gonna transpire when these two men come face to face. And believe it or not, because I don't see enough of real experienced people speaking on this, but a lot of the content creators, some of these guys who have just come into the sport over the past couple of years, you know, and have had an opportunity to rub elbows with fighters, promoters, and even have netted network deals with some of these platforms that air the bouts. Just because these people speak and have a camera and mic in front of them doesn't mean that what they have to offer is on the level as far as understanding boxing, the X's and O's. And sometimes it's insulting to the intelligence of someone who's been around and had the opportunity to see the sport and be involved in the sport to a greater degree. You could just tell how much these men don't know when they have their conversations on their platforms. And this is not taking a stab at anyone. This is actually speaking facts, because even some of the fighters have said when they had an opportunity that these guys are really insufficient when it comes to speaking on the sport. Will Sinclair, I see you out there, brother. Good morning to you. G McCall 09, what's happening with you? Thank you for stopping in. Please smash the like button as you come into the building. See, we already got people peeping through the blinds early this morning. My chat is telling me, the chat rate is telling me that there's at least 7 people out here, but only 2 of you have written in the chat. That just goes to show that everybody that's out there, they're not necessarily supporters, but they're just people who are just, you know, trying to see if there's a seat on a fence for them to ride, huh? Well, STORMYBMAN don't give a damn about seats, huh? Because my fences have razor blades on the top of them, huh? How about that? Yeah, good morning. I can get started early on that as well. But back to what I'm talking about. So, when it comes down to 2 fighters like these 2 men, everybody's gonna go with what they like, who they don't like, and regardless of why they don't care for them. And that's okay. But when you're speaking on a platform and you're speaking before the masses, you should have some sense of understanding of how it all can come together. It's troubling to see when people will do things, say things, just for views, just for someone to come out and throw a wall of support behind them. I really don't care about that. What have I always maintained when I've done content on YouTube for these past 7 years? I've said that My aim is to produce the most quality of content as I can. And even if it requires me to do research and get to true facts and figures about what's happening. One thing I do know is these two men have achieved a certain amount of success in their careers that has elevated them in the minds of those who follow the sport to be not only respectful of their accomplishments, but sometimes being clouded and jaded by said accomplishments. When it comes down to Canelo Alvarez, there's been questions about him even as early in his career when he was fighting at 147 pounds and moved up to 152 or something, where he basically was fighting a number of opponents at a so-called catch weight, even to the degree that people were calling it at the time Canelo weight. So he was kind of in between 147 and he was in between super welter and nothing definitive. And there were fighters at the time whom he could have taken on to really define that position, and he opted not to do it. Two of the fighters were the twins, the Charlo twins, who were at 154 pounds and super welterweight young men who were on their way to becoming world title holders themselves. And Mel Charlo ended up becoming undisputed at the weight, while his bigger twin, Maul went on up to regular middleweight. Canelo found himself in between those circumstances because those two young men, who are roughly around his age, if not a year or two older, he was staying out of the lasers, the beams, the spotlight of those men. And he still ended up having difficulties with fighters like Alston Trout, Erislandy Lara, you know, just to name a couple. So that was telling you something about him as a person, his character and his personality, because if you recall historically, a lot of the great Mexican fighters would take on whomever were the stiff opposition there. If it happened to be another Mexican fighter, they'd fight him. If it happened to be someone that was from foreign soil as far as Europe or the UK, they'd fight him. When it came down to the African American fighters, the black fighters, the melanated warriors, they'd fight him. And win, lose, or draw, they'd maintain not only respectability but credibility with what they were doing in facing these challenges. If you look at what Canelo has done, he has aligned himself with being successful going in where he had advantages over certain fighters. The one fighter of whom he tried this with, and it turned out that he really didn't have the advantage, was Floyd Mayweather Jr. Floyd, I believe, was 36 years old when he gave Canelo a shot after having him featured on some of the undercards of his matches. So you could kind of say that Floyd was grooming Canelo in a way to be built as a future opponent that would bring in not only a certain amount of interest in their fights, but a demographic, for lack of a better word, You know what I mean? So we got my brother Stephen L, the Mac, in the building. What's happening with you? Tay-Tay, what's going on with you, Tay-Tay, little sis? Good morning to you. Thank you for stopping in. Please hit that like button as you guys come into the building. What's going on with you? Yeah. So, with that being said, CANELO has always been in a certain lane. And when the success came, which was really built in because the Mexican fan base of boxing will support their fighters, especially if they're successful and they appear to be putting on spirited bouts. Now, when I say spirited bouts, and I've used that term, spirited, in a lot of my analysis when speaking on fighters, what that means is that that fighter brings a certain fortitude to their profession, their craft. They go out and they attempt to be the best that they can with the efforts behind the talents that they display. A lot of fighters don't have all the boxes check marked. So they may have power, they may have aggression, the ability to cut off the ring, the ability to apply pressure, absorb punishment, to be defensively responsible, a number of traits that you could see when you tune in to watch them. When talking about, I don't understand why people always run over animals in the road. When I'm going to work in the morning, I see so many road kills. That's just cruel to run animals over, because I've had a lot of chances to run animals over and I don't do it. I'm sorry, I'm just distracted by that because I'm seeing this almost daily when I go to work. It's kind of like, I think of that very cruel to run over animals, because you don't have to do that with your vehicle. Where was I? Oh, okay. Fortitude. Sometimes even ring IQ, the mental aspect of boxing. Some of these fighters have had it on display. And I'm talking about the Mexican fighters and their fan base and why they would support them. CANELO absorbed a great deal of that in his climb toward being successful in the sport of boxing, until he ran into someone who was more seasoned, more technically proficient, an all-around great fighter in Floyd Mayweather Jr. So, after facing Floyd, Mac of the South, what's good with you? He says at work, securing the bag, listening. Kamaran is out there this morning, top of the morning, Stormy, and listening and driving. Hey, good morning to you all. Drive safe. Wish me to do the same, because I'm on my way to my grind as well. But after falling short against Mayweather, whom they underestimated, they thought that CANELO would not only be able to be the youthful fighter going into that. I think he was in his mid-20s at the time, maybe about 26 or so. I don't know. I don't have the records and stats in front of me, but it turned out that there was a gross miscalculation of this particular black fighter, whom they didn't take to have more than just being a pretty darn good boxer, if not great, but the mental approach to the sport, the mental dynamics of being able to control a fight, not only physically, but mentally, psychologically. So they came away from that fight with Floyd, not only with a loss, where one judge had it unanimously a draw. And it was like, that was ridiculous because Floyd won basically every round in that fight. It was a repeat of a shutout, just like Sweet Pete Whitaker did against Jose Luis Ramirez back in the days when they took on one another. Anyway, I'm talking about this backdrop on CANELO for a reason, because it was at that point where they recognized that we need to be able to control things a little bit more. You see, CANELO had weight advantage over Floyd too. I think he rehydrated up to far beyond where they fought at 154 pounds, where Floyd never really weighed in at 154. I think he always was under by 3 pounds or more or whatever. And even when he was close to the weight limit, Floyd, you know, he had little tricks that he could pull to give the impression that he was heavier than he was. Because Floyd figured out long ago in his career what his optimum weight was, and he stuck to that. Again, a measure of intelligence that a lot of fighters of today don't display. Guys get out of shape, woefully out of shape. They beg promoters and people who will pay them to box for tune-ups, Oh, but you having fat camps. You having these situations where someone is gonna pay you to get in shape. No, it's your job and responsibility as the professional to maintain and take care of your tool of your trade, which is your body. PGH Big Dog, I see you out there. Salute to you. So, having weight advantages, but not only that, putting other fighters at disadvantages, And when you look at that aspect, because fighters can rehydrate upwards to sometimes 18 to 20 pounds over what they weighed in on the scales, which is criminal. And I've talked about this all the time. You know, guys fighting at what I deemed or termed artificial weights. Just because you walk around at 180 pounds, but you can make 147, doesn't mean you should be fighting at 147. You know, when we didn't have junior weight divisions in the sport of boxing, that was something that was really telling, revealing on the sport for fighters who would go in. Let's say 2 fighters are fighting at 147, but you will have one guy who might have come down from at least 160 pounds to make 147. And then you have the other guy who is just a few pounds over 147 when he goes into training. You understand? And so it used to be kind of that thing with no junior weight divisions, because a guy that was, let's just say a guy that was 165 pounds, he didn't want to fight a middleweight because that middleweight has all his strength and everything, but he'd go down beneath the middleweight, cut the weight real good, make that weight, and come in rehydrated, much stronger than the opponent. See, there used to be this thing called the same day weigh-in. See, you don't hear people talk about that very much, but STORMYBMAN is here to tell you about it, Same day weigh-ins, You weighed in the morning and you fought that night, How much rehydration can you do when it's same day weigh-in? Well, let me tell you something. If you're fighting more at your natural weight, then the cut is not bad. However, you don't have the advantage of a guy going in against you of being a couple of weight classes smaller than you. Now, they would tell you, historically speaking, that the reason that they changed the weigh-ins to a day before is because there were too many incidents of guys having brain trauma and things of that nature from boxing. Well, aren't guys still having brain trauma from boxing? Aren't guys even getting severely beaten up from someone who had an unfair weight advantage? You see, they'll tell you something hoping that you'll take what's being said at face value. That doesn't mean that it is face value. That just means simply that what they've explained to you is the reason that they're going to make a move, going to keep it moving. But I'm here to tell you that boxing was in a far better place when you had same-day weigh-ins. It was the unhealthy guys, the guys who had really not worked the way that they should to get themselves in the best shape that they could be in. And see, a lot of men back in the previous eras, they were gym rats. They stayed in the gym. These guys today, if they stayed in the gym as much as they stay on social media, they would be in prime shape. But it just goes to show where true devotion is. But back to Canelo. After recognizing where their strengths lie, that's what they would do. They would get fighters to fight them at Canelo weight, and he'd have advantages. And then the introduction of performance enhancing drugs. How long was Canelo using before he finally popped? I'm gonna tell you something about that. Just because the guy popped doesn't mean that's the first time he's done it, And this is where common sense comes into play, which is where, like, leading up to this fight, this mega fight, super fight, whatever you want to call it, between Bud Crawford, nobody's bringing that up, Why? Because if he did it against Golovkin, who was a top-rated fighter at that time when they faced one another, he'd do it against anyone, right? You can't tell me that he hadn't looked for certain types of physical advantages, because he is not some kind of Adonis his damn self. He isn't. Have you ever seen Canelo? Canelo is like 5'7", and he's a stout guy, but probably, at this juncture in his career, weighing up above 170 pounds. But still, when you see him, he's a little man. That's not intimidating in the least. But when you're talking about fighting in those lower weights, it can be intimidating. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Bud Crawford, who's been fighting at the lower weights, Bomac did an interview many years ago, and I like to try to find it, where he says when Bud turned pro at 135 pounds, he was down there, but he could have turned pro at welterweight, he said, back then. But they figured that they would give him time to grow as a professional, taking certain fights and be able to develop and get to a point where he could win, as I've talked about many times over, titles in multiple divisions, because you're starting out at the lowest weight that you can cut down to. That's a formula that a lot of fighters adopted. I mean, I remember Oscar De La Hoya fighting at 130 pounds, where he won super featherweight, something like that, against That guy, he fought at the Olympic Auditorium, where he won his first world title. I can't remember the gentleman's name. Forgive me. Time has escaped me in my memory like that. But as soon as he beat that guy, he moved right up to 135 in his next fight, because that was not a good weight for him. And he looked like he was sick in the fight, but he was stronger than the other guy. And he was younger too. That Oscar was like, you know, this is early in his pro career. He won that first WBO title. But when you look at it, Black Martial Arts Society, I see you out there, brother. Good morning. Good morning. When you're able to get away with doing something like that, it's an advantage. But let's go back to Hall of Famer Marvelous Marvin Hagler. He fought at middleweight his entire career and always made the weight a couple of pounds under the limit. So Marvelous Marvin Hagler was exemplary in the fact that he could show you how professionalism was done. And what did Marvin have? Like 60 plus fights or something like that in his career. A lot like CANELO, huh? But he was a professional. He kept himself in shape. When he wasn't fighting, he kept himself in shape within a few pounds of whatever his weight limit was. And see, that takes real dedication. These guys today don't do that. And these guys today are looking for certain advantages. Hagler was asked during his heyday if he'd be interested in fighting, moving up and fighting Michael Spinks, who was the light heavyweight champion at that time. And Hagler was like, no, I'm a middleweight. That's what I am. And see, Spinks, we all know the light heavyweight division is 175 pounds. And Spinks, who was a gold medalist, and he and his brother Leon, you know, the way that they fought, they gave in to competitiveness, you know, for their careers, like just being pros, going in there doing what they do. And Hagler understood that I'm in my own lane. I'm a middleweight. This is who I am. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the guys who look for those advantages, you see, because if you're good, you know, you don't care. You're secure within yourself, right? You don't need advantages. But there's so many of these guys who try to go out there and do that, man. I'm going back to a comment in the chat. Black Martial Arts Society says, that's what I'm saying, Stormy. If I was one of those reporters covering the fight, I would ask, what is the legal limit for clenbuterol for this fight? Yeah, you see, yeah, and that's why Black Martial Arts Society, in doing this video this morning, this is what I started off talking about these other content creators and people who do the interviews and everything. You can see that they are not really versed in what they should be talking about. You know, the way that they speak to the fighters and about the fighters and everything is always placating, kind of kissing their rear end or whatever, and not doing the dirty work, because the dirty work is a part of what we experience. Every time you get a news blurb that someone's done something inappropriate, it affects the sport. I did a video just the other day talking about Vito Mielnicki, his last opponent that he fought back in, what was it, February, on Valentine's Day. Connor Coyle from Ireland popped dirty for performance-enhancing drugs from their fight. And their fight, which was at the time declared a draw, has been turned to a no contest. But why are we 7 months into the year just hearing about it? You see, I did a video on that. Now, nobody likes to watch Stormy, right? But you watch these other fools out here who are blowing smoke up these fighters behind and promoters behind, but I'm talking about the real stuff, huh? The real stuff. And it's like, you should know that. Vito from New Jersey, just like Shakur Stevenson, huh? It's like the young man, the fight was declared a draw. It was a rough fight. It was kind of even. But imagine, maybe Coyle on PEDs wasn't really up to Vito's level, huh? And would have lost to Vito if he didn't have something coursing through his veins. And Vito, if I'm not mistaken, is an Italian fighter, huh? Italian American. So this is not about race. You understand? Conor Coyle was from Ireland. Who the hell is talking about these things? Me! I'm talking about them. Huh? Just like I'm talking about this drug cheat Canelo Alvarez, who's going into this September 13th fight against Terrence Bud Crawford, who's never popped dirty for PEDs at all in his career. And there is a separation of talent. There's a separation in age and experience. There's a separation in ring IQ, boxing ability, huh? All of these things, but they praise Canelo. They lift his cheating ass up over everyone else. I do a list called STORMYBMAN's Thunderous Top 10. He would never be on my top 10 list for being a drug cheat. No drug cheat will ever be on the Thunderous Top 10 because they cheat. Why are you awarding cheaters? Why? It's freaking ridiculous, man. It's freaking ridiculous. So I'm not going to placate like these guys do. I'm not gonna kiss his ass, huh, and pretend like he's something. Even his own countrymen really know the truth about him, and they don't support him to the degree that they could support him because they know these things about him. But guess what? They are on code as countrymen. They're never going to tell you publicly how they really feel about Canelo, but they will speak about him privately amongst themselves. That's the difference between them and we sellouts that look familiar but do not share the same DNA. Yeah. Leave it to me to tell it like it is, because people get mad, huh? People don't like it. But it is a fact. You know what I'm saying? It's a fact. So as we are going into this, these are the kind of things that should be talked about. These are the kind of things that people should like really, you know, look to cut their teeth into. But no, they're just placating. They're just, you know, oh, well, you know, you won several weight divisions and you're this and you're that. Man, the dude is a drug cheat, okay? You're a drug cheat. Why were you using drugs? Why did you feel that you needed another advantage? Because weren't you having weight advantages with rehydration clauses and everything that you put into your contracts with your opponents? Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. We got some more people that came into the building. Lewis Hinton out there. King Style Productions. What's happening with you? Brent Fox in the building. Steph Brown says, be well this morning, Sensei. Have a good weekend. Start. Cook Canelo, please, sir. You know, you can't cook that which is already done, huh? That only means burn, huh? So you burn Canelo, huh? His hair is already red, huh? Now let's tan his ass. Yeah. Anyway, Macadus Mac says, cook on it. Universal is saying, salute, Sensei. What's good with you? But yeah. So, as we hear these guys doing these interviews and talking about these things, it's like they skip the details. And they keep talking about him being bigger and stronger, more powerful than Bud. But the last time I checked in boxing, the bigger, stronger, more powerful guy don't always win, do he? Huh? There's usually something else that comes into play, huh? Ability, huh? Yeah. So when you see these guys out here speaking like they really know what they know, huh? And just because they have access to the fighters and promoters and everyone in that realm like that, that doesn't mean that they're good, huh? That doesn't mean that they're doing good work or even producing information that is information that you can use. There's so much going out here with these people who are on the take. It's ridiculous. Compromised principles, ethics, just swept under the rug for views and money. Do you not always hear someone talking about the bag, securing the bag, huh? There's no such thing as securing the bag. Doesn't the bag have an opening, huh? Of which how things are filled inside? So if the bag has an opening where you fill it, huh? Couldn't you also lose the contents of the bag? Let's just say if the bag was punctured and had a hole in it, huh? Things fall out, right? Yeah. You see? This is what it is. And many people don't view life like that. But you look at these content creators out here who will have you believe otherwise. Yeah. Hendog, fearless one, what's good with you? DOG 215, what's happening? Salute to you all. Yeah, so listen. Me talking about what I've been talking about thus far is shedding light on the background, the backdrop of CANELO. But the talking points of these guys in there, they're talking as if this young man, and I can call him a young man because he's young enough to be a son, right? Age-wise. But they do this because they want favor. But they're not telling you the facts. A lot of times you have to look at what's going on in the sport and evaluate and assess. I posed a question to some people a few days ago talking about the past 5 opponents that CANELO has fought. And I say, you look at those opponents and the success that he had against them, and you think about how he won, they all basically went the distance with him, right? They all basically, fought tooth and nail with him. A couple of them got knocked down early and they got up and finished the fight. In other words, he couldn't even take them out, couldn't even finish them. He's strong enough to knock someone off their feet. That's the strength and power, that he's strong enough to knock you off your feet. Now, you can get knocked off of your feet when you get hit with a shot you don't see, when you're not minding your defense, when you get caught in an exchange and don't see what's coming back at you during the midst of an exchange. Those kind of things, they can affect you. But to be able to set a knockout up, to lure a guy into a trap, to put him in a place of vulnerability where he didn't realize that you had him in a trick bag. See, those kind of things, the real professionals, cunning fighters like Bud Crawford, they do it to people all the time. And when I talked about Canelo's last 5 opponents, what I was getting at is this. How many of those opponents were on par with the abilities of Terrence Bud Crawford? Even though Crawford is coming up from a smaller division, how many are on par with what he has accomplished in his career? Now, when you answer that question, think about it this way. What has Crawford done to his opponents, the guys that he has done? Madrimov was the first to go the distance with him in a number of years and fights. However, Madrimov also fought defensively to not engage to the degree that he could be knocked out himself. In other words, as a title holder going into the fight with Bud, he fought not to lose, not to win. Yeah. And so he was safe. He was safe. But if he had tried to get at Bud and get rid of him and everything like that, he would have opened himself up to vulnerabilities that could see him being stopped for the first time in his career. People don't think about those kind of things. And these so-called sexperts is what I call them, because it's almost a sexual desire they have for kissing these dudes' ass and sucking them off. Yeah. That they won't tell you the truth of things like that. How many people have pointed that out? When you watch these guys do their content and they speak about this fight, let's break it down. Let's talk the X's and O's. Are they saying these things that I'm saying? But I'm not lying. You can go and check the facts. Check them for yourselves. You will see what I'm telling you is true. So, it is what it is. You know what I mean? It is what it is. And this is where we are in the sport of boxing. But as long as I'm out here to talk about it, I'm going to tell you the truth. Give you the facts. And as I was known to say early on, you don't hear me saying it too much anymore because it's a given. I'm always going to say something that's not popular. Yeah, I'm going to say something that's not popular. I'm going to say things that may wrinkle some eyebrows. Yeah, but it is what it is. So, but yeah, you guys, that's a little bit of what I had to say coming on this morning, because I have reached the destination, and from what I can see, them fields is empty right now, but they require my presence, and so I must leave. But I hope that you all have a great Friday morning. I hope that you all have a productive day, and send me some love if you enjoy what I do. You know what I'm saying? You can hit Stormy up. We got the Cash App. You know what I'm saying? We got the PayPal. You got the tip option on Streamlabs, where you can go and purchase the merchandise. I do this because it comes from the heart. I'm not doing it because I feel like, I'm going to get rich at this or something like that. I love the sport of boxing, and some of you do as well. You know what I mean? So with that being said, I'm going to get on out of here. I want to say shout out to the mighty LDBC, and we will catch you guys on the next one. Peace to everybody. Friday night chop session this evening.